What's up, guys? We're back. We're back. It's Sunday again. Welcome to the live hour, guys. Welcome to the live hour. How you guys doing this fine Sunday? How you guys doing? I wouldn't say it's a fine Sunday, to be fair. In Vancouver here, it's been raining. It's been raining quite a bit. I wouldn't say it's a fine Sunday in that sense, in terms of the weather. But we're here. We're all here. How you guys doing? You guys, I want to know how was the week for you? Okay. What are we gonna do today? Well, we're getting into the third week of this particular war between the U.S. and Israel and Iran, and well, now I mean, lately the United States has called on its allies to come and help secure the Strait of Hormuz because of all the destabilization that is causing to the world economy. And the question for you guys today is: should Canada oblige? Should Canada get involved in the Middle East? That is my question for you guys today. So that is what we're going to be talking today, and I want to get you guys' thoughts on this. Should Canada get involved in the U.S. Israel versus Iran war in some way, or in whatever capacity that you envisage, whatever role you think Canada can play in that particular war, if any. I want you guys to let me know today. Okay, so that's what we're gonna be having our conversation on today. Should Canada oblige the call by the United States or on its allies to get involved in the Iran war? You guys, as you come in, I want to you guys get in the comments. I want to know who's watching today, who's live with me. And I want to have a real lively conversation with you guys today. So I want you guys to get involved. Um, so you guys say hello to me once you get in, okay? Say hello to me. I want to know who's watching. Today, as I said, we'll be talking about this Iran war. This Iran war. The United States is calling on its allies to come and help secure the Strait of Hormuz, which has been locked down by Iran, and you can see what that is doing to oil prices. If you've been wondering, for those of you who are not really in touch with the pulse of what's going on in the world, if you've seen your prices at the pump go up, it's partly because of that destabilization in the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz is this strip of water that where it's basically a choke point where 20% of the world's oil supply, mostly going to Asia, passes. And part of that, and this body of water is controlled partly by Iran. They certainly have access to be able to determine who's able to pass peacefully and who receives missiles going through this particular strip of water. And Iran, in combating the United States, have decided that if the United States is going to cause them pain, they're going to cause pain to the whole world. And their strategy is essentially to export this particular war to the entire region and to the entire world in terms of high oil prices. So that's what's going on. That's what's going on. Um, so if you've seen your prices at the pump go up, that is why, and it probably will get worse. Is what we're because I mean I said maybe a few weeks ago that I think this war would be over in like a month because I don't think that it is sensible for the United States to prolong this war. We've learned this lesson with Iraq, with Afghanistan. It is not sensible for the United States to prolong this war. Um, Unfortunately for them, it looks like Iran is setting up to do exactly that because they know just how bad and how damning it is for the United States to engage in a long war in the Middle East. But it looks like Iran wants to drag this on. They've said they're not willing to sit down. Obviously, that is a bit of posturing from them. But they've said that they're not willing to sit down. They're not willing to have any conversations. They want to prolong this as long as possible and cause maximum damage to the world economy, cause maximum damage to any of the fellow Gulf states that decide to that decide to harbor United States military bases. Hi, Abby. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the show, Abby. Thank you for joining today. So, the question I have for you guys is: should U.S. allies help with Iran? Should Canada get involved? And in what capacity do you think Canada should or could get involved? That is the question for you guys today. That is what that is what we're seeking to answer today. Should Canada get involved in this Israel U.S. Iran war? So there are a few talking points here. There are a few talking points here because this is this war, I would say, is turning into a bit of an embarrassing situation for the United States. Okay, not only did the United States get involved, start this war, but we covered this a little while ago. We said, well, the United States said a few months ago that they obliterated the entire nuclear capability of Iran. Okay, well, just a few months later, we're seeing that they're attacking on the pretext that they're trying to hinder the Iranians from getting nuclear weapons. Okay, so that means they probably lied a few months ago. Um, and from okay, so from everything we're seeing now, it all the evidence that we're seeing now, it is telling us that the United States had no control really about when this war was going to start. It was really Israel felt that this was the opportune moment for them to take this proxy war that they've had with Iran for a long time to finally take it to the Iranians, and they made that call. And the Americans were drawn in because, according to their authorities, i.e., Marco Rubio and some of the people within the Trump administration, Iran was going to attack them, so they preemptively struck Iran. Don't ask me if that makes any sense. It makes zero sense. But that's what they said. That was their justification for joining in Israel in attacking Iran. Okay. Abby_9 says Canada may get involved, but please, they should just send money. Canada should not send people at all. Okay. So I asked this question because I know it is very simple for people to say Canada should not get involved, and in theory we probably shouldn't, because this isn't our war, right? We were not consulted. Neither was any of the other allies of the United States. They decided unilaterally to go start a war in the Middle East, to go attack Iran at this particular point in time, without consulting any of the allies, right? Without even as much of a conversation. They decided unilaterally to do that. Okay? So in theory, Canada should not get involved because, last thing anybody wants right now in this country is to send more people to go die on behalf of Israel, because really this is Israel's war, right? This is what Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu, this is what they wanted. This is what they wanted to be doing right now, right? The world, all the allies had no say in this particular event, right? So in theory, Canada should not get involved, but I'll tell you why we may not have a choice. I'll tell you why we may not have a choice. But let me catch your comment here. Abby says Canada should not join. Didn't Donald Trump say they didn't join the last time? Such ingratitude. This time they should do it themselves. Another reason is that I don't want Iran to send cheap bombs here. Well, if you believe some of the talk coming out of the Conservative Party, apparently there are members of the Iran Revolutionary Guard Corps currently on Canadian soil. So yeah, that is a scary possibility where there is a chance that Iran, if they really wanted to, could really try and do stuff on American soil. They could try and attack some of America's allies. Now, I don't think at this point, I don't think that is in Iran's best interest for them to try and orchestrate a terror attack on American soil or on Iranian soil. Because as of right now, they still have they are winning the war of the narrative, where there, well, as I said earlier, there is no evidence that this is really a war on Iran getting nuclear weapons. It seems like a fabricated piece of information that if, a pretext really that the United States is using to orchestrate their war, fed by Israeli intelligence that may or may not be worth shit, right? And so when you think about that, Iran is winning this narrative in the sense that as of right now, they say okay, they're attacking some of the, obviously they're attacking their Gulf neighbors, some of the other Gulf states, and a lot of what they're doing, fine, there have been casualties and collateral damage. Sorry to call people that, but in the reality of the way these things go, that is what a lot of the victims are in this particular case. They're collateral damage. My opinion is that they're not directly trying. It's just like you can say the United States was probably not briefed or understanding the fact that the school they blew up with 150 girls. In case you didn't know that, surprise, surprise, Israel and the United States blew up a location that they thought was filled with terrorists. Instead, they blew up a girls' school full of kids, essentially. So that happened. Um, so um, the Iranians are obviously trying to blow up infrastructure. They've shut down the oil wells because of they've been blowing up these oil infrastructure in some of the Gulf states. I think like Saudi Arabia, and maybe like Kuwait and the UAE have had this experience. Um, and they've obviously attacked U.S. bases in the region as well. And we heard recently that there were some Canadian forces stationed in that region who were attacked. So Abby_9 says another reason we shouldn't join is that there is nothing for Canada to gain yet. Let the U.S. be desperate and really need Canada, and we might be able to use it in negotiations. Well, so let's kind of do an analysis of this. So I've told you that Canada may not have a choice in joining this war, and I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why Canada may not actually have a choice in joining this war. So the first thing is that whether think about it this way. Think about it this way. The United States, irrespective of how they've been to their allies, is still an ally, right? And we have to retain our relationship with the United States as an ally. Think about it as, let's say you have a family member, right? You know this your family member ain't shit, right? Your family member is an absolute. It's just a person that likes to. Abby_9 says petty. I know, no. But let's say you have a family member that likes to. Maybe you have a brother, maybe you have a sister that just likes to start shit, right? Now, this one day they go out, the United States in this case goes out, beats on a certain kid, right? They go and they beat on a certain kid. It turns out maybe that kid has a baseball bat with them, and your brother thought this was gonna be a straight up fist fight. Your brother brought his fist to a baseball fight, or brought a knife to a gunfight, for example, right? So the question is, would you let your brother get beat up? Maybe a little. Maybe let your brother learn a little bit of a lesson, but ultimately you will get involved, right? So the fact is, there are allies. If they run into a problem where they're really really getting their butts handed to them, we have to get involved. That is the fact. Second reason why Canada may not have a choice in joining this war. Um, Abby_9 says we will join as allies, but not now. Well, there's another reason. There's another reason why we may not have a choice but to join this war is the fact that, Canada actually has investment interests. Some of our Canadian pension funds invest in the Middle East. So we have investment interests in the Middle East, and obviously we part of McCartney's trade diversification strategy has been to get investments from the Middle East. Now, if they have a whole bunch of infrastructure damage to deal with in that country, well, that possibly puts your investment promises at risk, right? or if they blow up certain infrastructure that is owned or related to Canadian pension funds or investment vehicles, then that potentially leads to problems in terms of returns on investment for those Canadian interests, right? So in a sense, Canada may not have a choice but to participate to protect its interests in the region, right? So that's another reason why Canada may not have a choice but to participate in this war. The other reason is that right now, and this is kind of like a bit of a balance that I think that there is to a little bit for people to understand. I've seen a lot of this online where people are saying, well, this is good for Canada because oil prices are going to go up. Okay. All price because I mean with the straight as I told you, you've probably seen. Okay, Abby_9 says, Mr. Wolf, you're playing devil's advocate, and I won't be convinced. I'll tell you more. I'll tell you more. Okay. Now, the big proponents of this particular of Canada's, you know, benefiting from this particular war in the Middle East, as they say, well, oil prices are going up, and that is obviously good for the oil sands in Saskatchewan, and they're good for Canada's oil in Saskatchewan and in Alberta, right? And that means that Canada can get a whole bunch of royalties. Our LNG is suddenly worth more. We're going to be booming, that kind of thing. Because the longer that war continues and the Gulf states are being destabilized and unable to supply oil, well, the world is going to need alternatives, and that is where Canada is able to bridge that gap. The problem with that logic is, yes, you get revenue from royalties, but the benefit of that is effectively offset by the fact that suddenly you're going to think about it as you now have to deal with the inflation that comes from higher gas prices, and think about everything you do with oil, right? Now if say the delivery vehicles that now suddenly have to deliver your food now have to buy this really expensive oil, well, that think about all the knock-on effects from that on the prices of things in the country, right? So suddenly you end up in an inflationary environment where, yes, the government is making a whole bunch of royalties, but suddenly your money is not worth as much anymore. You're not able to. We're already in an affordability crisis that could deepen if there is significantly higher inflation. And here's where it gets worse. Well, suddenly, if you're in an inflationary environment, then the Bank of Canada has to hike rates. They may have to hike rates, even if, and that is kind of the way that dichotomy that we're going to have to deal with. The Bank of Canada probably will need to hike rates in order to deal with inflation. That is not good news for people that are looking to get or renew a mortgage coming very soon. That is not good news for those people. So there are several like knock-on effects of this beyond the maybe the benefit, the short-term benefit in provinces like Alberta and Saskatchewan, where there might be revenue from that. Think about it as this: while Alberta and Saskatchewan can benefit from the oil revenue, we know that 60% of Canada's population lives in regions where there is no oil, like Ontario, like Quebec, right? 60% of Canada's population lives in those places, and those regions will not get direct benefits from oil revenue, right? So that's kind of the balance to be had there. So Abby_9 says Canada can't bridge the oil gap effectively because our oil industry is not well developed. That is true. Can you imagine, like, can you just imagine where Canada would be now if we had like a pipeline, like all the pipelines we need throughout this country, or all the means to develop the means to supply like Europe and some of these other places that are thirsting for like energy right now. Can you imagine if we didn't have just one LNG facility already developed right now? If we had everything ready to go for this moment, we would have been making mint, like absolute bank right now. But can you imagine if, for example, we had our critical mineral supply just like already and firing? Can you imagine if we had all that all set up, right? So this is a crisis right now in the world that was made for Canada to profit, but unfortunately, over the course of decades, we were not ready for this moment, right? So we're not gonna get the maximum benefits out of this particular situation, unfortunately. Abby underscore 9 says, Mr. Wolf, all this doom because Canada didn't join. Still, Canada shouldn't join because since we're not their ally. It's interesting. It's interesting actually, and I let me be clear here. I don't think that Canada should join the war in an offensive capacity. I do not think Canada should join the war in terms of send ground troops in and do a ground offensive in Iran. But we do have allies in the region, like I told you, just in terms of the Strait of Hormuz, stabilizing the world's supply chains in that way, that link to Asia is very important, right? And Iran has decided that that is the way they want to inflict maximum pain, so that there is a bit more of a deterrence. Well, one of their strategies is blocking the Strait of Hormuz and effectively destabilizing the entire world's economy, but also they're ensuring that the Middle East is destabilized in such a way that they're not able to supply the world's energy needs. Now, that it's funny. I'm just reading the comment from Abby underscore 9 there. Anyways, so the problem here then is, as I say, I don't think Canada should get involved in an offensive capacity. However, we may be required to protect our interests in the Middle East, but also protect our friends like Kuwait, like the United Arab Emirates, like Qatar, who we recently made deals with, Saudi Arabia. These countries who are our friends. Okay, no, our friends at this moment, I should say. Uh, Well, I mean, okay. So Michael Tass says Quebec needs oil too. We don't have enough refineries. We have quite a few refineries actually. I think people assume, maybe I think maybe I'm misremembering the statistics here, but I think we probably have enough refining capacity to supply our own oil in this country. We have refineries in. I'm trying to remember all the locations here. We have refineries in Newfoundland. Newfoundland might be Irving. We certainly have in Ontario. We have one in Quebec. We have one in Saskatchewan. The BC one, I think they might be just about to build. I don't remember the exact locations, but we have quite a few refineries. Michelle, sorry, not Michael, Michelle. We have quite a few. We have quite a few refineries. But yeah, Quebec needs oil, but clearly for some reason Quebec is averse to getting their oil from Western Canada. They would rather get it from the United States, and I don't get it. Maybe there is, maybe the reason why Quebec doesn't want. Oh yeah. So Michelle says there are a few in New Brunswick as well. Okay, yeah. So we have quite a few refineries in this country. To be fair, Michelle, Quebec is interesting. It's very interesting that they. I don't. Maybe because of the cost of building the Energy East pipeline or some sort of Trans Canada type of pipeline like that. I'm not sure, but it seems a bit weird that Quebec would rather receive oil from the United States, crude from the United States, than it would from Western Canada. I don't get it. Sometimes I wonder if it's a thing where they want to maintain enough of the separation from the rest of Canada, so that if they ever decide that they want to be a nation of their own, a country of their own, that they're not tied to the rest of Canada. I wonder if that is the explanation. Beyond what people say, there's the environmental problems that they reported for the Energy East pipeline and some of those things. I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure. Abby underscore 9, I missed one of your comments here. So Abby says, I'm not sorry for Ontario or Quebec. Let the oil scarcity get them. They can use their pure energy. I think you mean clean energy. Abby underscore 9. Ah, the see the what I mean here. I mean, to be fair, the problem is not necessarily the oil supply. I think for the most part, the oil supply will be taken care of in North America. I mean, where Quebec gets a lot of its oil from the U.S. And certainly there's some that gets that they get also from the oil, the crude that comes from Western Canada goes to Ontario. So I'm pretty sure there's an alternative there for them to get some of their oil supply from Ontario as well. So the supply is not the issue. The issue is that what I was saying when I said that Ontario and Quebec don't get access to the royalties is that, well, they don't have they're not producing any crude in Ontario and Quebec, right? Now the problem is that they all some I'm guessing that maybe you don't know this, B_9. It's the fact that oil prices are set on oil is a world product, right? It's a world product, and so the prices are set by the world market. So everybody throughout this country is going to have to pay a higher price in some way or another for the oil. Now, Alberta has the offset of the fact that they are getting royalties from the oil, from the crude that they're producing. And Saskatchewan has that benefit as well. That is what Ontario and Quebec do not have. They do not have that offset of making royalties, but they have the inflation. That's what I'm trying to say, if that clears things up for you. So Michelle says, no, that is the political lies. Quebec people would love better having petroleum from Alberta, that's for sure. So that's interesting that you say that. Um, so who's telling these lies? Because certainly I hear this from the politicians in Quebec quite often. I've heard Francois Blanchette certainly say that, or try and denigrate crude oil from Alberta several times. So I'm curious actually, Michelle, where you're saying those lies are coming from. Maple Boy says, "Oh, welcome to the show, Maple Boy. Welcome to the show. You just sneakily got in there. I didn't realize you had joined." Michelle, my friend. Sorry, Maple Boy, my friend. Michelle is also my friend. Fair enough. So Maple Boy says, "Pierre to screw Canadians over." Um, Pierre to screw Canadians over and thinks that Kanye should try to stop making a deal with the U.S. Oh, have you used the Google Translate there, Maple Boy? I know you're a French speaker, but I'm having trouble understanding what you've written there. So if you could help me clarify that, that would be very helpful. Abby_9 says, not the cost, not the environment. Mr. Wolf, it is self-interest. Anyways, so the question I had for you guys is: Should Canada get involved in this? Should Canada get should Canada get involved in this particular war, in the Israel-Iran war, the U.S.-Israel versus Iran war? Should Canada get involved in any capacity? Because Donald Trump has called on the allies to come and help. And it's interesting that this comes literally 1 week after Donald Trump said this. I'll read you a quote from Donald Trump. We should play a game where we say, is this a real Donald Trump quote or not? Because trust me, there are some wild things that man says. So Donald Trump said, not on March 7th, he said, the United Kingdom, our once great ally, maybe the greatest of them all, is finally giving serious thoughts to sending 2 aircraft carriers to the Middle East. That's okay. That's okay, Prime Minister Starmer. We do not need them any longer. But we will remember, we don't need people that join wars after we have already won. So this was something President Trump said a week ago about the UK deciding that they were going to stay out of the war for as long as possible. Now, I don't think it is out of the question that allies who were not consulted, because war is expensive, right? And many of these, imagine Canada in the kind of economic situation we're in at the moment, going to go prosecute a war. The UK is in a similarly dire situation. Their economy is in a similarly dire situation, and they don't have the benefit of the United States deep pockets for war, right? And so the United States went and started a war, consulted nobody, and they somehow seem surprised. This is one of these things that the United States does where they do a thing and then they proceed to play victim. And it's like, okay, so why are you not getting involved in a war that I started without telling you? It's like, what is this? Hello, folks. Welcome to the show. So Maple Boy says, let me see if I can get back to what you're saying here. So Maple Boy says, Pierre let's see. Pierre to screw Canadians over thinking that Kanye is trying to stop making it. Oh, I see what you're saying. Well, Pierre Poilievre has been saying this quite a bit. He's been saying that Makani doesn't want to make a deal with the United States, and that Makani is trying to replace the United States with Asia. And I've said this already on many of my videos. I don't. That's not my read. I don't think that is what Makani is trying to do. My interpretation of what Makani is trying to do is that he's trying to build a bigger pie. He has literally said several times, Canada needs to increase its non-US exports by 50% by, I think it was 2030 or something. I don't remember the exact date that he put on it, but I think it was 2030. Canada needs to, so he, what he is trying to do, my interpretation, is to build a bigger pie, build a bigger base of exports. So obviously, by virtue of the fact that we're exporting more to other places, our percentage of exports to the United States will come down. Okay. Now, the other thing Pierre Poilievre has been saying recently is that, well, in Makani allowing EVs from China to come in, Canada is willingly sacrificing its auto industry. Now, I think that is one of those things where Pierre Poilievre just says things. To be fair, the I think I've heard me say this. I think the EV deal with China was a good idea because number one, it opens up the market for Saskatchewan farmers, right? And eventually I hopefully for pork from Manitoba as well, we'll start to get into China. So those markets are open. That's big business for Canada today that people don't seem to realize. But there's also the fact that, and to be fair, for 3% of our auto markets, that's not that bad. That's really not that bad. The access that gives us in exchange, not it's. I think it's a great deal from that perspective. But there's also the fact that if if indeed if this is real, that the United States will try and destroy our auto market because we give China 3% of our market, then that is the dumbest shit. That is the literally the dumbest shit ever. Because it's like they are literally trying to dictate our domestic policy in this country. And I mean the United States have done this quite a bit. I'm sure they influence our domestic policy quite a bit. But that is the height of it. That is the height of taking the piss. Right? So that concept, I mean, and you look at some of the behaviors that we're seeing out of these American legacy vehicle manufacturers. They've taken money, taxpayer money, out of this country, and still proceeded to move manufacturing back to the United States. They do not deserve exclusive access to our markets. They do not. And the other thing I will say is this: the United States seems to have this knack of leaving its allies with their dick in their hands. Sorry for the crass language, but they seem to. And I'll explain that in a little bit. Let me just catch up on your comments here. Oh yeah, somebody brought up Russia, so we're going to talk about Russia very soon. Actually, we're going to talk about Russia. And this kind of feeds in very nicely into where we're coming in this conversation. The United States seems to have this very, I mean, it's not recent, but more so under Trump, they've come to this point where they have this knack for leaving their allies with their dick in their hands. I'll explain why I'm saying that in a little bit, but let me cover your comments here. Michelle is telling me that the Bloc Québécois are also all the political parties in Quebec. Yeah, so that's what I was saying, Michelle. The politicians in Quebec seem to be telling us that Quebec does not like oil. That's what the politicians is telling us, and yet they continue to import oil from the United States, which, as I said, that's a little bit hypocritical, to be fair to me. That is I find that very, very weird. Okay, I don't know. I don't really understand the logic there. Why the province seems to choose that, okay, pipelines and some of these things are abhorrent, and yet they proceed to still get oil from the United States. It seems a little bit weird. Okay. Michelle says no. The only way is to protect our own ships, and that is it. Okay, so Michelle is saying the only capacity in which Canada should get involved is to protect our own ships. Interesting. Interesting. And Fox Club is saying no, we should not until the trade situation is resolved. Canadian soldiers should not die for the Americans' fight. As I said earlier, um, yes, I don't think Canada should get involved in an offensive capacity, but we may not have a choice because one, we have investment interests in the Middle East, but we've also got friends in the Middle East I would like to protect, like the United Arab Emirates, like Saudi Arabia, like Qatar, and so we might not have a choice but to protect them. But also, if Iran continues to hold the Strait of Hormuz, we will feel that in inflationary pressures in this country. I'm sure some of you have already seen prices at the pumps. If you fueled your car, some of us who are not blessed to have an electric vehicle right now, if you fueled your car, you would have noticed the exorbitant gas prices. I think I filled up at $2 a liter last I fueled in BC. That is bonkers. That is mad. And that is going to turn into inflation very, very quickly. It is already inflation. You'll see that in the prices of groceries at some point. Okay? So that kind of prolonged situation is not good for anybody. So that is also another case for some of the allies getting involved to try and settle this. Now, I would prefer for Canada to get involved in a diplomatic capacity if we have any leverage, maybe to try and calm things down a little bit. I would like to see that. Or at the very, very worst, in a defensive capability to try and protect some of our allies in the Middle East and some of our interests there. So Maple Boy says Pierre Polyev is misleading Canadians by claiming that Mark Carney wants to stop dealing with the United States. The goal is simply to reduce Canada's dependence and not end trade. That is a perfect summary, Maple Boy, of my interpretation of Mark Carney's goal here. Now, I think what Pierre Polyev is trying to say, to be fair, is that the actions being taken by Mark Carney will inadvertently lead to a stop to trade with the United States, because that is the way, unfortunately, Donald Trump functions. That is the way Donald Trump functions. Donald Trump is the type of person where, can now think about it this way. Canada had no business following the United States into 100% tariffs on Chinese made EVs. We thought at the time that we were going to build a North American EV manufacturing supply chain. That was what we were looking to build with the United States, and we followed blindly and put 100% tariffs. And we're in the situation now where we've allowed these Chinese EVs back into the country, and Donald Trump will say, okay, the fact that you've allowed 3% of your market to the Chinese means that you cannot deal with the United States. Possibly, he might say that. That is a reasonable person that you can deal with. That is not a reasonable person you can have. That's not a reasonable position. It's not a reasonable ask, because the United States itself is backing off a lot of those EV policies. So why should Canada continue to stick to them? Right? We put those tariffs on with the interest of forming a North American supply chain. Now that's not there anymore. Uh, okay, I've been slow with the comments, so I got to catch up. Michelle says, I just don't understand why we don't have a Canadian car company. Have you seen North Korea, or have you seen South Korea population is around cars? I think even lower, they make sub cars, a lot of things. What happened to us? Yeah, I know. It's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that if I would have loved, I would have loved to. I mean, it's unfortunate that all our car companies are either Japanese or American at this point. It's a really unfortunate situation. I know they've. Well, I'm part of it. Part of it, to be fair, the is because we have such a small market, and so because we're such a small population, there's only, I mean, relatively for the scale that an authentic car manufacturer would need, we're just not the size. I mean, even even Mexico has their own. I'm pretty sure Mexico has their own like Mexican car, right? They and because they have the population to at least buy that car, right? The problem with Canada is we're such a small population, and so it really, in terms of economies of scale, it doesn't really make sense to develop a car. And that is my understanding of the situation there. Foxstop says, I would support opening trade with Russia if it would benefit Canadians. I don't know about that. Okay, so the fact that you mentioned Russia there, Fox Club, makes me I'm it Michelle says opening trade with Russia. Are you crazy? No, not crazy. Fox Club says he's not crazy. Are you sure? Have you gotten checked recently, Fox Club? What are you talking about making trades, making a deal with Russia? What are you on about? Uh, Michelle says, no, no, I know you're not crazy. I'm just joking. No, no, don't worry. We're all friends here. Fox Club said, we're all friends here. It's okay. We're allowed to rib each other a little bit. Well, see, here's the funny thing. Here's the funny thing, right? I said that the Americans have this knack for leaving their friends with their dick in their hands. I've talked about the EV situation and the 100% EV tariffs we applied, and America backing off the North American supply chain situation by trying to cannibalize Canada's auto manufacturing, right? So there was that. Oh, Michelle is asking what's the population of South Korea. Somebody Google that, because while I'm talking here and thinking, I don't know the population of South Korea off the top of my head. But so somebody put it in the comments, and then we can kind of discuss how that compares to Canada relatively. But what I'm saying here is that we obviously we put those tariffs on China, and then the United States suddenly decided between one administration and the next that okay, they wanted to have all the manufacturing in their country. They don't care for a North American thing. So we were left with our dick in our hands because we were like, oh, we alienated China so that we could have this situation, this deal going on with the US. Okay, so that's one situation. Here's another situation where the US has left its allies with their dick in their hands. I keep saying dick in their hands. They've left them in a situation where, let me use a less crass term. They've left their allies holding the bag. That's a better term. There, less crass. Okay. The United States recently announced that they were dropping sanctions, and this ties into, thanks for the tee up there, folks club. This ties into what you were saying about Russia. The United States recently dropped their sanctions, well, some of their sanctions on Russia, because their justification for this was that, well, because of the shocks to the world's oil supply, Russia, which is I think the second biggest oil manufacturer or third, somewhere between they're second or third, I'm not too sure, in the world. Russia can help to absorb some of those shocks by producing a lot more oil and being able to supply to the world. Now, the United States did this again, just like they did when they started the war in the Middle East. The United States did this again without consulting their allies. Now, all their allies, everybody agreed that okay, the Russia has started this war of aggression in Ukraine. They continue to prosecute that war. Their mission is to take as much of Ukrainian land as possible. Now, all the allies of the United States decided to apply sanctions in unison in order to hit Russia where it hurts. And now, guess what? In the process of prosecuting this war, I don't know what their plan was, but the United States decided again unilaterally, without consulting their allies, to drop the sanctions that were on Russia in order to help to prevent like oil prices from going up. So effectively, the United States is helping to fund Russia's war in Ukraine. Again, they have in that process left their allies with their dick in their holding the bag, guys, not dick in their hands. I don't know what's going on. I need to go rinse my mouth out with bleach at the end of the show. I'm being a little bit of a potty mouth here, but you see what I mean there. You see what I mean. Anyways, Michelle says, yeah. So Michelle says because they want bigger transfer payments. It's weird. Okay, Michelle says, okay, Canada did not start this war. It is the U.S. and Israel who started it. They can protect all those countries. Well, you say that, but my point, Michelle, is that that's kind of the way relationships work, right? Unfortunately, those Gulf countries, regardless of whether the United States and Israel decided to start this war, regardless of whether they consulted anybody, that's the way kind of this being an ally to another country to the region. This kind of the way it works, right? This is the way it works. Yeah. So we in that sense we can't leave the United States and Israel to deal with this by themselves. They've got their hands full. Clearly, they're being embarrassed in the Middle East, guys. The United States certainly is being embarrassed. I can tell you that. Because I'll read a tweet and not sorry, not a tweet, a Truth Social post from Donald Trump that kind of encompasses just how embarrassed the United States has been in the Middle East over this war of theirs. But I want to catch up with your comments first. Foxtrot says, I like Pierre, but I like the fact that Kanye is out looking for deals to diversify the Canadian portfolio. And it looks like you and many others seem to agree. Because obviously we had the NDP floor crosser this week, leaving the Liberals on the brink of a majority. So it looks like it's not just you that likes what Carney is doing in terms of diversifying our trade. But obviously, uh, but obviously, there are a few concerns. There are a few concerning things still, even with McCartney. I think if we're and this was something we did last week on the live show. For those of you who were not here, if we're objective, there are still worrying signs in our economy. I mean, there was a report of 80,000, almost 100,000 job losses in the economy in the first quarter of this year. That is still a worry. So there are several things like that are still not quite where we want them to be under McCartney. So we can be objective like that. But okay, so Foxtel says he's not a fan of floor crossing. Why not? You tell me. Well, why not? We can talk about that a bit more, maybe in the last few minutes here. But why not? Why are you not a fan of floor crossing, Foxtel? You let me know. So Michelle says, what's the population of South Korea? And I think Michelle has done the legwork for us there. Michelle says, the population of South Korea is 51 million. So why can't they build submarine cars? A lot of construction equipment, and they own the company. Why can't Canada own stuff? Because oh yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I mean at 51 million, that is wild actually. I didn't realize. I mean that makes sense then. Um, hmm. Why can't Canada do that? Do what South Korea is doing? Because maybe they don't have like short sighted politicians. See, here's what I'll say is Canada's big problem. South Korea is very much certainly a more homogeneous environment compared to Canada. Canada is one where Canada, yes, we've got 40 million people thereabouts, um, but they're also very fragmented interests in this country. We've got the 13 we've got the 13 economies instead of one kind of situation still going on. We've got, provinces like Quebec versus Alberta having separate interests. We've got First Nations interests. And the problem in this country is that we do not have a unified sort of federal kind of like we don't have a I'm looking for the right word now and it escapes me. We don't have a unified picture of what we want this country to look like, what we want this country to do. Right? We have these all these fragmented opinions about how the country should run. South Korea doesn't have that problem, Michelle. South Korea has they're just one whole unit. They're very much a more of a cohesive unit where they've decided as a country that they want to have these, their cars, their submarines, their construction capabilities. That is I'm sure if you try to do that in Canada right now, you'll have several interests just chiming in from here and there. That is fundamentally the problem that Canada has. We do not have an ability to have and in some regards this crisis that we're facing right now with our economy, in some regards that is why it is such a blessing, because it kind of obliterates some of the extra stuff that we usually spend our time worrying about. We're in an existential crisis. Our economy is in an existential crisis right now that needs to be handled. And even now, you still see several different people going. You get the NDP leader. I know I always pick on Avi Lewis, the prospective NDP leader, talking about how we should not be developing LNG, even if right now, if we had our LNG already set up, we would be making big bucks and bank out of this crisis going on in the Middle East. So that is fundamentally Canada's problem, Michelle, in my opinion. Anyways, Michelle says Canadians only like to invest in apartment buildings. Oh my God. Michelle says Canadians only like to invest in apartment buildings, and the crazy part is crazy. Oh, and then they said the crazy price to rent it. They don't take any risk in making stuff. There you go. That's the other problem. So, Fox Club, why are you not a fan of floor crossing? You haven't responded yet. Okay, so Fox Club says people vote more for the party than the person running, at least a good percentage. No, I agree with that. I agree with that, Fox Club. And we can have a bit of an open round here, actually. You guys put whatever you want to talk about, put that in the comments, and we'll have an open conversation. Let's ditch the structure a little bit and towards the end of the show here. Yes, the fact is the design of our system is for us to vote for our representative. However, you're right. The reality of it is people vote for the party and not the representative. And it kind of looks a little some type of way for the votes you think you cast for a certain party to just walk across the floor to a different party. That is a fair point. Now, here is where I would push back a little bit on this. The For me, the reason why I don't mind floor crossing is this: cross the floor, sure, but eventually you will have to face the electorate in an election. Whether it is now right away in a month or in 2 months in a by-election, or you have to do it in a year or in 3 years, you still have to face an election. And typically it's never a friendly time in the polls, going back to the polls for any floor crosser. Most of them have very short-lived time in politics afterwards. Okay, so that shows you that there is some justice in the world for people. That shows you that there is some justice in the world if you cross the floor. Now, my other reason why I'm not a fan of straight up election if a person crosses the floor is because, well, um, elections are expensive to organize, right? Imagine we've only just had an election a year ago. less than a year ago. And suddenly you have to organize a whole bunch of by-elections for four people now who have crossed the floor. That is an unnecessary cost for the taxpayer, right? Because then Elections Canada has to organize all these small elections. I don't think that is necessary. I don't think that is necessary. If the people feel strongly enough, next time there's an election, they will have their say. So I believe in like our democracy is has, I think, good checks on this particular type of behavior. If the represent and I think the representatives of the people have to have an ability to represent, right? We have to be able to trust them to represent, in my opinion. So that's just my thought on that. That's just my thought on that. Uh Okay, so I missed Maple Boy's comments here. So Maple Boy says if Pierre was really a good leader, the poll will be in his favor, which it is not. Oh, the polls would be in his favor. To be fair, polls are not polls are a good indication of how. So here's a question for you, Maple Boy, based on what you're saying. Do you think Makani's rise in the polls is because people do not like Pierre Polyev, or is it because they love what Makani is doing? That's a question for you, because we know under Justin Trudeau, the reason Pierre Polyev was so popular was because people did not like Justin Trudeau. It was because Justin Trudeau was going through a moment that happens to, and this will probably at some point happen to Marconi, especially if he doesn't start to deliver on some of the big things that we want to see. If the economy continues to be absolutely crap, this will happen to Marconi too. So the fact is this, right? Do Okay, so Maple Boy just put in a comment there. I'll come to that. So my point now is that Makani is rising in the polls. Now, is it because people like the diversification, people like some of the things that he's done, or is it because Pierre Poilievre is just repelling people? I'm curious what you think there. So you get in the comments, let me know. Uh, okay, so Michelle is saying you got to vote for the team, but to me they are all shite. Paperboy says MPs cross the floor because he's doing what would be best for the voters. In the case of Laurie Idlout, it seems that that was the motivation. Although there has been some conspiracy theory floating online that her son is in a bit of legal trouble for I think it was no, let me not float something I don't necessarily remember the details of. I don't know the details of the case. It's an ongoing case. But conspiracy theorists out there have been saying that Laurie Idlout's son is in a bit of legal trouble, and that is why they say that is why Laurie Idlout crossed the floor. But Laurie Idlout, in the sense of what is public and what we know, said the reason that she was crossing is because she wanted to be a part of the government to be able to deliver more for her constituents. Okay, so in the absence of any proof and concrete evidence, in to the contrary, let's believe that Laurie Idlout has crossed the floor because she wants to deliver stuff for her constituents and not because of her son's legal trouble and some form of bribery that Makani has promised to free her son. Okay, I'm not gonna say more than that so that I don't get you guys and me into trouble. So what else is here? What else is here? What else is here? So as I said, this is free. This is free form. Okay, so you guys put whatever you want to talk about in the comments. We'll talk about it in a few minutes here, and then before we close up shop for the day. Okay, so uh, Michelle says it doesn't matter what party is in power as long as they're central. As long as they're central, too much. Okay. Michelle, help me out here. Okay, you're saying not. It doesn't matter if it's liberal or conservatives. No, that I mean, I would hope, and if not, it becomes a very hopeless situation for Canadians. I would hope that See, the way I look at these people, I don't look at them as parties, because you're right, in a sense it doesn't matter. What I look at them as, I try to vote based on who they're putting up to contest. Like, I won't lie to you. I was one of those that looked at that. I went and actually did some research on their platforms. I discussed this on this channel in the build up to the election. I looked at their platforms. I talked to the I talked to people, got people's opinions about some of the things that they were looking to achieve. I actually critiqued their platforms before voting. So I'm not. For me, I'm totally mostly blind to the liberal conservative kind of divide. What I want to see is, in every particular situation, I don't know what the question in the next election is going to be. Probably still going to be affordability. I want to see who has the better plan. That's the way I tend to look at the votes, not as a liberal conservative divide. Uh, so Michelle says Pierre should resign. He should really go work for his money in a real job. Ha ha ha. Why you ragging on my boy Pierre? Why you ragging on Pierre? Why you ragging on my boy Pierre? Come on. That's not fair. That's not fair. Um, Look, I've said that I think that Pierre is done. I've said this. I've been honest about this. That is my opinion. I think Pierre Polyev is done. But I will be honest, I like Pierre Poilievre's new strategy. I don't like the fact that he is going on these trade missions. It's kind of weird that they criticize McCartney for going on these trade missions, and they still do talk about the fact that McCartney is always on a trip here or there, and yet in a bid to look more prime ministerial, look more like a prime minister, Pierre Poilievre is copying exactly that, right? And I think it also makes a mockery of this country that a person without any constitutional authority to negotiate on behalf of the country is out here gallivanting in other countries talking about trade deals. Okay? I think that's a joke. It's a joke on this country. Right? So I don't like that whatsoever. I don't know why he's doing that. I know why he's doing that. I know he's trying to look more like a prime minister so that people will look at him as in a more favorable light, but it kind of rubs me the wrong way. I'll be honest. Um, Frog Club says, does Trudeau try to make a comeback like his father did when he returned in '81? No, Trudeau. I think we've talked about this Fox Club before. Trudeau is currently balls deep in some other affairs right now. I'm not gonna say exactly what affairs the man is up to, but he's currently busy. He's making money giving speeches. Um um he's got his hands in certain affairs right now, in a certain pop star. His hands and all sorts of body parts. Stop it, Victor. Anyways, he's got his hands in all sorts of things. He's got his hands busy right now. I don't imagine that Justin Trudeau is in any position. Oh, stop! Oh, stop! Now I fill myself up with all this talk of body parts going in all sorts of places, and then it's like when the moment I said position, I'm like, oh god damn it, I got myself. No, no, no. But just I don't think that Justin Trudeau is gonna have any motivation whatsoever to come back into government. I don't think we see Justin Trudeau back. Okay, so Maple Boy is saying he thinks the reason Makani is rising in the polls is because people like what he's doing. Well, I said this in a video, and I also said this in our live show last week. I need to see some results from McCartney. For now, I'm still rating McCartney a 6 out of 10 because I haven't seen the results I want to see in terms of affordability is not easing, and certainly is not helped by this war. Um, Affordability is not easing. We're not seeing much in terms of like um, unemployment is not coming down as fast as I would like, and certainly housing is not has not necessarily improved as well. So these are all things I want to see improve. Um, it has been a year, and I fully take on board the fact that it will take a while, but it hasn't happened yet. That's just the fact. Michelle is saying he hopes Justin Trudeau. No, no, no. I take it back. You're Michelle says you're crazy, Fox Club. You're crazy. Why are you trying to traumatize us? He says imagine if your next first lady is Katy Perry. Man, oh my God. That's so funny. That's so funny. Your next first lady is Katy Perry. Come on, Fox Club. Why are you trying to traumatize us like this? Michelle says Pierre's problem is that he thinks too much as an opposition party. That is true. That is true. He is too good at being an opposition leader, being that attack dog kind of personality. And to be fair, that is what he's trying to change by doing this thing where he's going out and talking about trade deals. I think that's what he's trying to change. That is the perception that Pierre Polyev is trying to change. He's trying to appear more like a prime minister as against an opposition leader. Right? If you get you, I'm sure you guys have noticed the strategy coming out of Pierre Polyev. The shift there is really to look more like a prime minister as against being an opposition leader. But the problem with Pierre Polyev is inherently his personality and indeed his job description is an opposition leader. So, ah. You're right, Michelle. I think Folks Up is crazy at the moment. What are you on, man? What are you on? Oh my God! Yeah, the Folks Club says Trudeau would be the first lady if Katy Perry is the president. I would vote. I think I would. A lot of people would probably vote Katy Perry ahead of Justin Trudeau to be to be prime minister of this country at this particular point. Um, I, to be fair, speaking of which, actually, I asked this question in one of my videos during the week. Who do you consider the worst prime minister in the history of Canada? Who do you consider? I know I'm young enough. Well, I'm young, so I don't necessarily remember that many prime ministers. And to be fair, I only became Canadian. Well, not that long ago now. So I've only really seen two prime ministers in this country. So what I want to know is, and some of you who are older might be able to help here, or who have lived in this country a lot longer than I have might be able to help here. Who is the worst prime minister that you remember? Uh, who's the worst? Michelle says this, both the Trudeaus. I'm Fosco says Paul Martin. Paul Martin. It then wasn't Paul Martin only prime minister for like 1 year or something, or pretty short, certainly pretty short. But I'm curious about that, Michelle. You're saying that okay, so Kim Campbell. Okay, Kim Campbell was the one that was the shortest ever reign of a prime minister that we ever had. Obviously, the only female prime minister. She had what, 2 months? Was it not 2 months that Kim Campbell had? Anyways, Michelle says that was a summer job. Oh my God. Oh, you guys are killing me with this. So actually, I want to know though. Pierre Trudeau. I know one of the reasons people do not like Pierre Trudeau was because he tried to nationalize the oil sands, right? I think that was that as I remember it, from my a little bit of my Canadian history lesson there. The reason why people did not like Pierre Trudeau was because he tried to nationalize the oil, and then it kind of blew up in his face because oil prices tanked and stuff like that happened, and people have hated him ever since. Joe Clark was a winter job. Wait, wait a minute. Am I mixing up Joe Clark with Paul Martin? Which of them was what was the? There was one of them that sort of was in power for like a year, and then sort of miscalculated and called us ended up in a snap election and then lost. I don't know if that was Joe Clark or Paul Martin actually. As I said, I've only really known Justin Trudeau and now McCartney as Prime Minister. I wasn't even here for Stephen Harper, to be fair. So I can't really tell. So I want to know. I'm curious actually. Why do you think for each of these people, why were they such terrible prime ministers? Hmm? You guys, Michelle and Fox Club, you guys help me out. And before we round up here, actually, I want to read something, just to tie up this topic that we had going about Canada's involvement in the Middle East, possible involvement in the Middle East. Donald Trump said many countries, especially this was one week after saying that that the US does not need anybody, does not need the UK to get involved after the war is won. Listen to what Donald Trump says on Truth Social barely a week later, exactly a week later. It says many countries, especially those who are affected by Iran's attempted closure of the Hormuz Strait, will be sending warships in conjunction with the United States of America to keep the strait open and safe. We have already destroyed 100% of Iran's military capability, but it is easy for them to send a drone or two, drop a mine, or deliver a close range missile somewhere along or in this waterway, no matter how badly defeated they are. Hopefully, China, France, Japan, South Korea, the UK, and others that are affected by this artificial constraint will send ships to the area so that the Hormuz Strait will no longer be a threat by a nation that has been totally decapitated. In the meantime, the United States will be bombing the hell out of the shoreline and continually shooting Iranian boats and ships out of the water. One way or the other, we will soon get the strait open, safe, and free. So, so this was Donald Trump here, and do you know why this is particularly embarrassing? It's the contradictions within this particular statement. Donald Trump said, on the one hand, said Iran is totally decapitated. Well, if they're totally decapitated and all their military capability has been obliterated, well, they shouldn't be able to still be threatening anything, right? If both these things cannot be true at the same time. You cannot say that Iran's capabilities have been completely decapitated, and at the same time say that they still have the capability to bomb ships in the Hormuz Strait. It makes no sense. So that's the first embarrassment in this particular situation that you're seeing here. That, and you can tell that the Donald Trump and his team are they've wrapped themselves so hard in the knots that they do not have a way of untying themselves. Okay, so that's the first point. The second piece of this that is particularly embarrassing for the United States is that they're calling on the UK as for one of the allies that they need to come help them with the Strait of Hormuz. Where, as I read you a little while ago, Donald Trump criticized the United Kingdom and said they don't need people to join wars after the war has already been won. But now he's calling on the UK to come support. So that's the second embarrassing situation here. The third embarrassing situation, to even add insult to injury, is that Donald Trump is calling on China, of all people, to come help keep the Strait of Hormuz open and safe. Now, why would China even help? Why would China help in this particular situation? As far as we know, actually, this has become public today. This has become public that China and Russia are actually helping Iran. Russia is obviously supplying intel that is helping Iran find certain U.S. targets. Like they've destroyed expensive radar systems in the Middle East that the United States needs. They've destroyed several U.S. kind of tools and on information being supplied by Russia. And possibly China is also funding this. And I saw recently that apparently China is the factory essentially helping Iran to build these drones that they're using in their fight against the United States. So why would China help the United States? So it is an absolute embarrassment, again, that the United States is calling on China, of all people, to come help in this particular situation. Here's another reason why calling on China is even more embarrassing. China actually gets to, they made a deal with Iran, so their ships are passing by safe and sound. They have no issue with the Strait of Hormuz being closed. You know that? Anyways, it's just silly. It's just silly at this point. But I want to round up now. I'll catch up on the last of your comments here, and then we can get out of here. It's been a great show. Great having conversation with you guys. Well, what have I missed? Okay. So Michelle is saying it was Joe Clark. I think he was prime minister for 9 months. Okay. So I was mixing Joe Clark up with Paul Martin. I guess Paul Martin had a longer term in office. Maybe what was he 6 years? Was he 6 years? I don't know if my memory serves there. This is all history class for me. This isn't necessarily something I remember that I experienced. So pardon my memory there. So Oh, Michelle says our best prime minister was Harper, and at the very least one of them. Okay, so that's a worthwhile thing to ask as well. Who, if you were nominating the best prime ministers, the worst ones, I'm hearing Kim Campbell, I'm hearing uh Joe Clark, I'm hearing the two Trudeau's here. Who would you regard as the best, and I mean, obviously, this is constrained by whatever experience you have, as well. Who would you regard as the best prime minister Canada has ever had? And Michelle is saying that our best prime minister was Harper, certainly one of them. Um, First up says during the Paul Martin election, it was all about America, not Canada. I remember not knowing what was going on. So exactly like the last election, then the Carney election. That's it. Sounds like you're saying that the Paul Martin election was exactly like the election that got Mark Carney into office. Kind of similar. Foster says Harper was amazing. Well, I know that a lot of people said Harper was kind of like again, this is anecdotes for me. Harper was kind of a cold operator. He did not give a flying fuck about nobody. Wow, wow, that's high praise for Stephen Harper there, folks club. Harper is on your Mount Rushmore. That's wild. Okay, so who are the other ones on your Mount Rushmore there, folks club? Wow, people would like Stephen Harper to come back. Wow, interesting. So real quick, it's time for us to get out of here. So you guys tell me who would be your other prime ministers to go on your Mount Rushmore? I don't know. From what I've heard about Jean Chrétien, Jean Chrétien was also particularly good. From what I hear, again, not my direct experience, but anecdotes. Jean Chrétien apparently would be somebody that would be up there as well. What do you guys think? Jean Chrétien, do you agree? Agree, disagree? What do you? Uh, I don't know. The other one as well. Who else could we throw in there based on anecdotally? Who else would I throw in there? Um, hmm. Jean Chrétien was one of the Diffenbacher. Okay, so Chrétien, you agree with Chrétien? Uh, Diffen, is it different? Okay, what was Diffenbacher known for? I know Chrétien was known for fiscal responsibility. He gave us a balanced budget. Um, what was different and he famously refused to join the war. I think that he refused to join the Iraq war. Was it Iraq? But he told the United States to go suck to go f themselves. Um, okay, so Diffenbacher was known for healthcare. Interesting. So it was Diffenbacher that gave us universal healthcare. Okay, that's interesting. That's interesting. I need to catch up on my Canadian prime ministers and what they did. Get myself a little bit of a nice rubric on that. But I don't know. Before too long, I think I guess I'll collect enough prime ministers in my lifetime that I'll be able to have the kind of encyclopedic memory that Fox Club seems to have for prime ministers. But anyways, it's time for us to get out of here, guys. It's time for us to get out of here. I'm 20 minutes over, but that was because I was enjoying this conversation I was having with you guys. So thank you, everybody. I'm not going to go through the roll call today just because we're way over time. But yeah, thank you guys for joining the show. If you're not live with us, obviously drop your thoughts in the comments. We we appreciate you getting involved. Yeah. So that's what we got. I'll see you guys next time. Take care. Bye.